Brandon Baney with Scott Burton, getting ready to do a deep dive into the MaxPreps ratings. This is a big piece of the criteria that's being used this year and really last year as well to help determine not just who gets into the playoffs, but then how those teams are seeded. We're seeing that in soccer. We'll see it in volleyball. We're certainly seeing it in football, Scott. And I know as an athletic director, you're probably having lots of conversations about this.
Yeah, we definitely are. But I think, the thing that people have to understand is this is what everybody wanted. They wanted the seeding because we had too many times where, the state championship game was being played in the semifinals, and we just saw that all the time. And so people were tired of the ping pong balls and whatever else was going on to determine who plays what, but they wanted a seeding system and they got one. This is the first year for MaxPreps in Idaho, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have its flaws or people don't quite understand really how it works. And so basically the long and short of it is it's a computer generated system that takes all human element out of it, and nobody seems to exactly know the formula that's used, but the gist of it is it's going to be the score of the game, with margin of victory and your strength of schedule. And that gives you a rating. Okay, well, here's what we're starting to see. Let's take Minico, for example. Minico, undefeated, number 8-0, but they're ranked number 9 in that MaxPreps ranking, which means they're probably, they need to win the conference, but, they'll probably get an at-large bid, you hope. But it just doesn't look right because here they are sitting behind, for example, a 4-4 Skyline team, and Skyline is well ahead of Minico. Well, what's the reason for that? And so we reached out to MaxPreps with a bunch of questions, and that was one of them. And one of the things that we were told is strength of schedule means a ton. Well, okay, that's fine, but that kind of makes scheduling a little bit different now, for an athletic director, because, all right, so we want to improve our ranking. We better make sure that we schedule good teams, because if we schedule a bunch of, patsies and just roll over people, that isn't going to help us, and ultimately when you break down that philosophy, yeah, you do want to schedule good teams because they're going to make you better. But there's that thing to think about. The other thing that really kind of plays a role in this is you see, well, going back to Skyline ahead of Minico, Mountain Home beat Jerome. Jerome's ranked ahead of Mountain Home. Jerome beat Burley, but Burley's ranked ahead of Jerome. So you look at this and you're like, how in the world is this happening? Well, strength of schedule. Well, for those teams that played the game, the only thing that matters is the number on the scoreboard at the end of the game. So you're telling me even though I lose to you, you're still better than me? It doesn't make any sense to me at all, regardless of strength of schedule. Head-to-head should supersede that. There is nothing in the formula, in the program, or whatever, that does head-to-head stuff. So yeah, it's raising a lot of questions. But the other thing that's really raising questions in this MaxPreps ranking is the margin of victory. Now this is really super interesting, and it's going to get worse in basketball. We saw it kind of rear its ugly head last week, or the Middleton Emmett game. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So basically what happens is, and nobody knew what the magic number was that people had to win by. So you go into these games and you've got team A versus team J, right? Well, team A is supposed to beat team J by X amount of points. Well, the magic number in football is 15, which means that if you win that game by more than 15 points, then you get all of your max rating points that will help propel you, up the rankings. If you don't, and you win by 6, you get hurt in the rankings, or you don't climb as much as you should, even though it was a win. But what is not factored in is, let's say that a team is up by, 20 points, and there's, 4 minutes left in the game, and you put your JV in, or you put some sophomores in, you put your second string in, and they give up a cheap touchdown. Well, you just won by 14 and not 15. and now you get hurt in that ranking system. And so here we are in this culture of sportsmanship, and we're finding teams saying, I've got to win by X amount of points. Well, that leads us to what happened with Middleton and Emmett. Word on the street is that the ranking points were in the minds of those teams. So instead of taking a knee to win a ball game, tried to get another score, it backfired, turned the ball over, lose the game. Okay. And so if that's starting to play a part in how you get ranked, man, then you're just asking teams to run up the score. You're asking your starters to stay in longer, and then you're risking injury, and who knows what's going on. And we slide this thing into basketball. Well, the magic number for basketball is 20. So you're telling me that you're going to keep your starters in late into that fourth quarter just to keep that 20-point lead, because that's where we're going, And granted, I'm not saying that there's everything is wrong with this system, but it needs tweaked, because there are some elements here that are bringing out some very bad characteristics. I like our Idaho Sports Power Rankings. They do a great job, and we would have tweaked those to fit this, if we were asked and needed to. But with this thing that they got going on right now, they're going to have to really revisit this. Now, one other kind of fun fact about this whole Max Prep thing. Well, last week, Wood River forfeited to Minico, right? Okay, so we're not telling any people anything they don't know. Minico was probably going to boat race Wood River, okay? Well, they had to put that in as a 2-0 win because it was a forfeit. Well, we all know better than that. But that 2-0 win, that forfeit, hurt Minico. And so when I was on the phone with MaxPreps, I brought that particular example up. And I was told that, no, that went in as a 15-0. I go, no, it didn't. Look at it. So we went to CalPreps, where all of the formulas are done. And it was put in as a 2-0. And their response was, yeah, that's probably going to hurt them. And so it's like, well, what do we do? Do we put it in as a 15-0 game? Well, but then you have to decide, who makes that decision? Was Minico 15 points better, or do you just stick with the 2-0? I mean, what is the criteria? And what I found out, there was no protocol to fix that. And granted, that doesn't happen all the time, but it happened, and there was no plan for it. So there's a lot of little things that are going to start popping up, and they're already popping up in football. I think when you get to basketball, it's going to be a whole lot worse. And this system really doesn't take, 5A versus 4A into consideration either, So you could have a 5A team that has a kind of a lower strength of schedule, hurt a team that they're playing in the 4A ranks just because they're not winning at the 5A ranks. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yep. So there's all these little things that are kind of really weird. And Gooding was kind of hurt by it a little bit last year, because last year in football, we went to it, right? Gooding, let's see, Homedale was the only undefeated team in 3A last year. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I got my facts right. Homedale was the only undefeated team in 3A. Gooding went 7-1. They beat undefeated Kimberly in the conference championship, right? Well, because of this formula, they had to travel on the road as a conference champion to a 3-loss South Fremont team to start the tournament. I mean, what's wrong with that picture? A lot. And Kimberly finished second, yet hosted 2 playoff games. And now you get into this year, you have Lighthouse Christian, who is 0-7. But where they stand in this MaxPreps ranking is they have a decent shot of making the playoffs over teams with better records and have done better. So, yeah, this MaxPrep thing has really got some people scratching their heads. And granted, this is what we wanted. We wanted a seeding system. But I think there's some things that we have to work out.
Well, I think it's okay for seeding purposes, but when it's in football, it's a little bit different because there are playoff bids being awarded based upon this rating system.
Hmm.
That's where the big problem comes in, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at this formula is kind of holding you hostage, and you're hoping that everybody that you play wins all their games, which, and if you liken it to the college football rankings as well. I mean, it's got some similar components to it. But yeah, you can't tell me that, no offense to Lighthouse, but you're sitting at 0-7 and you haven't won a game, and I don't care if you went and played all 5A teams. I mean, really, does that tell you how good you are? Even though Lighthouse and they can't play 5A, you get my point. Okay, you can't tell me that's not fishy. It's not right, because it isn't.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Scott, is there any consideration to, I think of like Horseshoe Bend, which is a 1A D1 school, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a 1A D2. They beat Notice, which is a 1A D1 school, but it seems like Notice got penalized for playing a really good undefeated Horseshoe Bend team because they're sitting like 7th or 8th in the MaxPreps rankings, where if you're played an undefeated team and lost by 4, shouldn't that help? But it seems like since they were the D1 and supposed to win over the D2 school, they got penalized for that.
Yeah, because you have your division rankings, you've got your overall rankings, and so when you play out of not conference, but out of like 5A, 4A, 1A, 2A, whatever, you cross over. Yeah, you have the big rankings, right? And that's going to tell you kind of where you stack up against the team that you're playing. And so, yeah, you could actually play up a division and get penalized for it, even though you put on a good show, and a good fight. You could get penalized for playing down. I mean, the whole thing doesn't really take into consideration, and this is exactly what I was told, doesn't take into consideration playing up or down. And that's the tough part. And that makes scheduling a little bit more tricky as well for some of these teams that are really cognizant about their ranking.
Yeah, especially where you're at. We talked about this at the start of the season where those 3A, 4A schools have to play each other a lot, but maybe a Twin Falls says, you know what, we don't want to play Kimberly, or Jerome says we don't want to play Gooding anymore because it's going to hurt us.
Yeah, and so you really start to think about who it is you put on your schedule. For convenience sake, I think we'll probably all stay the same, but it does make you think a little bit, and everybody has to think about making the playoffs through this ranking system, and what teams on your schedule are going to give you the best chance to do that.
I will say also, just really quickly, for the other sports that use it, like for soccer, for example, it was only based upon the end of the regular season MaxPreps ranking, which basically renders district play inconsequential except for clinching the actual spot to state, right? We talked about it. Sun Valley Community School beat Kimberly in districts, yet they are seated below Kimberly at state.
Again, here we go. It's a head scratcher. And I think the big problem people have is if a team beats a team, they should be ranked higher than them, period. Unless of course, they're the only win on on their schedule, and they're 5 wins better. I mean, yeah, okay, those things we see. But when they're pretty even teams and one beats another one, it just makes sense that, hey, that one's ranked a little bit higher. Granted, not always the case. I get it. A 1-win team versus a 4-win team, that's not going to happen. But when they're both right there and this one's higher just because of strength of schedule, it's like, then why they even? I mean, they beat them. I don't get it.
Yeah, I will say I've had a lot of problems with volleyball this year as well, where according to the IHSAA, the scores that are supposed to be put into MaxPreps for volleyball are only supposed to be matches that were best 2 of 3 or 3 of 5. So you get to these tournaments where you're doing pool play, and sometimes it's a best of 2. So you could still win 2-0, but it was only 2 sets. Well, that isn't supposed to count. Yet there are coaches who are putting those in. There's no regulation on it. And so you see also on MaxPreps, you can look at any number of teams that have ties in their record because, we tied 1-1. Well, that game isn't supposed to count. And if we're using this to seed teams at state volleyball, that's going to create a lot of problems if not everybody is playing by the same rules. And I don't think it's intentional. I just don't think there was a lot of clear guidance on what they were supposed to do.
And that's a good point, because one of the questions that we asked, that I asked the people at MaxPreps was, okay, so what is the biggest flaw that you see in this? And they gave me two answers. Number one was, we've got to have all the information. We got to have all the scores reported accurately. And you just illustrated that really doesn't happen all the time. And so, what one school puts in, another school may never check, or all the schools may never check, but the scores have to be reported accurately. And the other one, obviously, is they're struggling with the margin of victory type of thing. But, they said they capped it at 15. So teams weren't trying to win by 50. They were just trying to win by 15. So there were a couple of things that they pointed out, and they go, hey, you know what? Maybe next year in Idaho, we revisit this. We sit down and say, what did you like? What did you not like? And what can we do to fix it? I will tell you this, though. The people at MaxPreps that I talked to, they were so cooperative and so nice. They were fantastic, and they were very straightforward. So I will give them that. Transparency, she told me everything that she knew. And so, kudos to them for at least, saying, hey, we don't have a protocol for this, or man, maybe we need to look at this. But they at least said that. And so, when this is all said and done, maybe Idaho needs to sit down and realize what's best for them and tweak this system if we need to. And I think MaxPreps will do it if we tell them what we want.
Yeah, that seems to be the biggest thing is they're working for us, right? We should be able to go to them and say, here are the criteria we want. You can still process the formula. It's not they are reporting to us, hey, here's what we came up with. Okay, thanks, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, I think the big thing is that nobody seems to know exactly what the formula is. I mean, you call the IHSA office, they don't know. MaxPreps doesn't know. It's CalPreps that really is in charge of all of this. And that's where MaxPreps gets their formula. But nobody seems to know the secret recipe. The colonel is hiding that original recipe a secret.
Okay, well, hopefully this was enlightening to our listeners and our viewers to try and better understand. At the end of the day, nobody is going to be 100% satisfied, but I think if we can get 85, 90% of the way there, I think it's better than what we used to do, right?
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm not here to just, bag on MaxPreps. I mean, I'm just saying that there's a lot of questions out there that people don't know the answers to. I didn't know the answers to. But it's not a perfect system, and you're absolutely right. It's whatever we use, it's not going to make everybody happy. But being educated is step one on anything that we do. And so there's your confusing education on MaxPreps.